Okay, we are live right now on LinkedIn, on Facebook. It's on YouTube too, but nobody knows how to find that one on purpose. And for today, we're also streaming live on Clubhouse. Yeah, and today we're also streaming live on Clubhouse. This is something which is new. This is something which we're really experimenting with. The reason why we're starting now and not earlier is because we are working out some of the kinks over here. But we're going to try and make this work. And even if it doesn't work, I'm fine with that because at least we tried, and we'll know for next time what didn't work, and we'll make it even better. So, the Nursing Home Podcast. You know what? Start this again. Welcome to this episode of the Nursing Home Podcast, the only podcast that you need to go to learn what is actually going on in the nursing home space. Today, we will be having a conversation with a fellow podcaster in the space, Nancy Griffin. Nancy, welcome to the Nursing Home Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Michelle.
Sure. It's a pleasure having you on the show. Generally, before we get too much into the podcast, people know who I am already. They don't know who you are necessarily. Would you just take a moment or two or three and just let us know how you got to doing what you're doing right now professionally?
Absolutely. Yes, no one in the nursing home industry would know me. I have 25 years of experience in hotels, hospitality, spas, and wellness. And I have some history with senior living. My grandfather founded a CCRC in Baltimore in the late 70s, and he was very involved with an organization called NACRA, the National Association of Continuing Residence Associates, about their rights and advocating for them. So I personally saw them in their CCRC that was one of the best in the country, and thought, wow, this could be done better. I think that there's some changes that come in. And being in wellness and spa, I kept seeing more and more wellness and hospitality infiltrating the senior living industry. So I decided to make a career change. And last August, I founded my podcast, and I interview experts more along the lines of iconoclasts like you, people that are really trying to shake things up and get down to what's really happening and what's changing and tell the real story. So I've had the opportunity to interview 40 different experts at this point. We've dropped 3 seasons, just started season 4. So, wow. So I'm a student of senior living, and I've had the opportunity to speak to some great teachers.
Wow. Well, that is amazing. And this is you definitely bring a unique perspective to the podcast. And I think just to hit it off, just to start off, what is, I know that there are terms that we confuse sometimes, and we know that there's something called healthcare. That's a place where we go when we're sick, we're unable to care for ourselves, we have a problem that needs to be fixed. So you go to a doctor, you go to a nursing home, you go to a hospital, you have to fix that problem. Then wellness is something that is kind of mixed together. It's like branding and marketing. You know, a lot of people interchange those terms. That's a whole separate conversation for another time. But if you don't mind, let's just start off with that distinction between wellness and healthcare, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I think wellness has its roots in preventive medicine. And interestingly enough, I did the first research study on the spa industry 25, almost 30 years ago at Cornell when I was at the hotel school, and there was about 50 spas at the time, and they were like fat farms and boot camp type places, and they were based on eating healthy, exercising, stress management, healing, spa treatments and such. And I feel like that is really what we're seeing in the senior living industry when it comes to wellness is more attention to eating healthy food, definitely exercising, socially connecting, finding your purpose. All of those are along the lines of the wellness spectrum. And so I think it's an exciting time. I'm finding much more crossover into spa services. Of course, salon hair has always been big in senior living, but more along lines of functional medicine and following people through their trajectory of health. So wellness is really about preventing disease states.
Well, so let's call a spade a spade. We like to do that here on the show. For the typical nursing home, of course, they have a hair salon, a beauty parlor. These are things that look great when they're part of a drop down menu. It's a good bullet point to add to your brochure and a quick drive by on your video. But in reality, you have people who work really hard there. The hairdressers work really hard to try to bring a semblance of living back to senior living. Most of the time, it's crisis management, it's health management, even preventative medicine, maintenance, maintenance care. But when we talk about actually living, I really think there's something that's missing, fundamentally missing from the senior care space, and which is why it's exciting that people like yourself are getting involved in senior living. And I'll tell you something that I think I've shared before on the show, but I haven't shared it with you and people who are listening now. And that is, I would tell my activity staff sometimes that sometimes I look down on within the facility because they may not have the same credentialing as other people in the facility. They're not nurses, they're not doctors, they're not therapists. They just walked in off the street, so to speak. But in a way, tell them that they're the most important people in the building. Now, as an administrator, your job is to tell that to every single person in the building that they are the most important person in the building, and that's because it's true. But I would really tell them that in a way, they are the most important people in the building. And that's because everyone else has a job to keep the residents alive, to keep them well, make sure they don't get sick, make sure they don't fall. If they do fall, manage the crisis, see if you can stabilize them, try not to send them to the hospital. We have therapy. Said, but once they're alive and they're sitting there in their room, they have 100 square feet left of space on this planet to call their own, if that much. Maybe that's even shared with other people. Constant intrusions into their bedroom, which is really their living room and their dining room and their kitchen and their house. That's where they live. And you have the ability, you, the recreational team, the activity staff, to give them something to live for. Everyone else is keeping them alive. You give them something to live for. You give them life itself. And that's almost like a sacred duty that they have, to fill. So bingo doesn't do it. Because think about yourself. If we would be, if we're seniors and we merit to live that long and still be functioning, and we should all be. And you're sitting there and you've been on the nursing home podcast and you hosted the nursing home pod. You've been involved, you managed care, you were a vendor, you were a care provider, you were something, you're a functioning person. And now all of a sudden society looks at you as it's almost like a number. 102A fell today. And of course you're not allowed to say that, but this is what really happens. So when you just getting back to the point here, yes, I am going on a soapbox here because I believe in what I'm saying right now very strongly. And the truth is a little bit uglier. We won't go down there right now. But if you can really introduce not just preventative medicine, but wellness, healthy living, when again, I don't even know, Nancy, enough of what you do, but glowing older, right? The concept of not just aging. Aging is sometimes a nicer word for dying, and we don't like to say that, but that's really the truth. Sometimes we say, okay, we're kind of waiting. They're not producing, so to speak, right? They're not part of a job. They're not part of any operation. Some of them have no family left, or no family left that cares about them, or shows that they care about them. And so, like, we'll throw a bingo. We'll put an oldies '60s movie on for them because this will calm them down, so that we can check off that they ate their food without throwing it across the hall today. And we'll have one person observing that. Again, I'm oversimplifying the thing, but my point is, the industry is ripe for affordable solutions to healthy living. I don't just mean eating asparagus and broccoli, which may be important as well, but I mean giving them an emotional reason to be alive, a spiritual reason to be alive, just a meaning of life. Why am I getting up the next day instead of throwing more antidepressants and adding that to their smorgasbord of medicines that they're taking on a daily basis, multiple times a day? Let's get to the root of the problem and let's give them something to live for. Anyways, I went on a huge rant there, and I'm sorry about that. But tell me a little bit more specifically of what you actually do with seniors. And I honestly don't know, and that's why asking the question. So tell me a little bit. I know you're saying that your world. What was Nancy's world before thinking of getting involved in the senior space, and how has that emerged, and how has that changed?
Well, just to make a couple comments on what you just said, because
Sure.
I think it's so critically important. I'm a big horseback rider, and I've been involved with horses my whole life. When horses retire, we put them out to pasture to frolic with other horses and run around and eat grass and live a good life. And with the people that get older, we put them in a box and treat them like a horse, when you put him in a 12 by 12 stall. And I've noticed that if you put a horse in a 12 by 12 stall and he doesn't have a purpose, that he gets depressed and he gets physical problems. And so it's not surprising that the way we've set up our system creates more medical problems, creates mental health problems. So I think what you're doing is so important because and just like Robert Kramer from NIC, from Nexus Insights, says that the senior living of the future won't be called senior living. I don't think that the nursing homes of the future will be called nursing homes. I think we're going to have to probably get rid of that word because there is so much negativity associated with nursing home, especially after the pandemic, the way the media has picked up on it. So from my perspective, I want to make a change and help bring over all the healthy living. I've been a marketer in spas and wellness for 25 years, working with skincare companies or massage companies or wellness resorts, those kind of things. So if we can bring all that expertise over and fill senior living with health and wellness, I think we can really shift the paradigm. Of course, your segment of the senior living population is probably the most difficult to make change, I would think, because it's very aligned with healthcare. At that point, when you go into a nursing home, you have some serious issues that you need to grapple with. So I think that end of the spectrum is the hardest, but I think that there's more and more of a trend towards multi-generational housing situations that won't marginalize and warehouse people that need to be in a nursing home. I think the best thing we could do is integrate people in nursing homes with people outside of nursing homes and that and make them feel, even if they have a disability physically, maybe they have something to share with their minds are sharp. I just interviewed Eric Peterson, the founder of Seniors for Seniors, yesterday, and it's a nonprofit that matches senior high school kids with seniors. And a lot of these high school kids need community service. And so it's a matching service to bring together the seniors to mentor the students and the students to help the seniors with whatever they need. So programs like that, I think, are really going to make a shift. And it's not easy. I think ageism is by far the hardest stereotype to address because we're all scared to death of aging. Like you said, nobody wants to end up in a nursing home. Nobody. And so it's a hard thing to address. But I think unless we address ageism, and I'm quoting Ashton Applewhite here from her book, This Chair Rocks, A Manifesto Against Ageism. She's sort of the queen of ageism. Unless we can really make some fundamental shifts in the way we all perceive people that are aging in our Western culture, I don't think there's going to be any drastic shift to bringing wellness, if you say, into nursing homes. I think that's going to take a paradigm shift. And that's what you're doing with your podcast. I noticed you said you're going to learn things here that you won't find on LinkedIn. A lot of the stuff that we find in senior living is pretty dry and pretty with the status quo. But to quote Bob Kramer, I think there's a huge innovation disruption coming. And if you don't change, you're going to get disrupted right out of the game. So I think it's an exciting time. And the pandemic has really given the industry a swift kick in the butt.
Yeah, that's something that's happened. What I will say is, first of all, you just dropped a lot of good knowledge right there, and we're going to try to link to some of those things you mentioned in the show notes after the episode, which will be available at thenursinghomepodcast.com. But in addition to that, it is true by the time someone ends up in a nursing home, they are usually more advanced and they have more physical challenges. Well, first of all, you gave me a great title for this podcast. Are we treating our seniors worse than horses? I mean, I don't even want to say the answer to that question, but but yeah, I mean, this is really, yeah. I think I'm going to do that actually. But anyways, moving right along. Here's the thing. There's a couple things. You're right. People are petrified. Am I going to end up in a nursing home? And am I going to end up, in a middle bed in a facility somewhere in the middle of nowhere? No one's going to visit me. And what's going to be my purpose in living at that point? And this, goes a little bit deeper to the core. Assuming that we figured out what our purpose in living is right now, and whether that transfers and how that transfers to when we're at a stage when we're much more challenged, much more limited as to how we can explore and what we can do. But putting that all aside, you're right. It probably the change can and probably will happen sooner in other communities where seniors the seniors are at an earlier stage, if you will, maybe in assisted living community, or like you said, retirement centers and the like. But what I will say is that nursing home residents, many of them, whether they're long-term residents or they're not, can you mute yourself, Nancy, on Clubhouse? Okay, I don't know why. I was just getting the echo.
Me too.
Yeah, it's not your fault. You could shut off mute on Clubhouse. You could take yourself off mute.
Oh.
Because it wasn't your problem was me. I don't know why. Okay, let's just try this again. All right, now it's good for some reason, pretty much. All right. Anyway, the point is that there are plenty of residents that are long-term residents, and they definitely have the capacity to help mentor others. Even though they're in a nursing home, it doesn't really change very much. And there are plenty of residents who come there, and they might even be young. They have a physical reason why they're there. They had an injury. They're coming there for intense therapy and the like. And they certainly have time on their hands. They certainly have what they can do and what they can contribute. But the bigger challenge really is for the long-term residents. And I think, offering them real opportunities to be active, even out of the community. Sometimes not practical for them to leave physically. And bringing people in with COVID definitely has been a challenge. And technology doesn't solve that problem completely. But it's the overall mindset that we're thriving here. We're not in the stall waiting to move to. Here we go. We're not minimizing. We're not waiting to downsize from a stall to a coffin. I know that sounds gross and horrible, but unfortunately, if you call a spade, that is how most of society looks at that stage in life. I'll even add to that. A big part, a lot of the problems boil down to money. If nursing home operators had more money to put into the business, which I know firsthand and have been involved in some of this stuff, they don't. It's a myth that they're sitting on big piles of money, and the reimbursement is completely out of sync with what it actually costs to care for them. And the decision makers on the reimbursement is our insurance companies, the government, Medicare, Medicaid. And the reason why it is this way is because it's not a priority. And I'm not going to get too much into politics here, but we know that when something is a priority, the money is found, whether it's borrowed, stolen, created, printed. I don't care how. I don't understand how, frankly. Makes no difference. If it's important, we find the money. You know what? We do that in our personal lives. And as a society, we do this on a larger scale. So the real reason why there is a lack of funding for the fundamentals, there's going to be funding to make sure they're alive. There's going to be funding to make sure that they're somewhat well. But should there be any extra funding to make sure they have a purpose to live? There isn't. It's just that's the fact. The fact is that there isn't. The activities directors, recreational directors have very limited budgets because the money is simply not there. And the money is not there is because we don't sufficiently care or respect them. And guess what? It's not them, it's us. If we're lucky, us will one day be them. If we're lucky, we'll get there. So having programs like yourself and using these types, introducing spa-like experiences to seniors is a step in the right direction. But let's just move on a drop over here. What are you doing? In what ways are you actually branching out into the senior space? What type of environment? And are there specific services? I'm not really sure yet exactly what you are doing.
Well, right now I'm doing the podcast. I'm starting, it's Glowing Older. It's on all the podcast platforms. It's a weekly business podcast. And I'm starting a brief called the Senior Trade Brief. That's going to be a newsletter style aggregation, curation of some content in the space. Right now, I would actually consider myself still a student. I'm getting like an MBA in senior living right now, so I have such a great opportunity to interview people that are at the top of the industry and learn from them. One point about your activities director position, I've noticed through my podcast, I've done some podcasts with some national directors of life enhancement. I noticed at the ICAA conference, there was 18 different titles for activities director. But I'm definitely seeing a trend towards more respect for that position and it moving nearly to a C-level position from just a kind of lower level. I have a fitness background. I can do the bingo, like you said. It's becoming a much more important role, and it's becoming much more technology driven. So a lot of the resident directors, activities directors program, life enhancement, whatever you want to call it, really need to get on board with technology. My sponsor for season 4 is a company called TSO Life. That's a business intelligence platform, AI driven, that can really help match and not only help somebody find their purpose, but maybe even give them a prompt, like a Netflix prompt that, hey, maybe since you liked this, you'd like this. And the technology can really enable these activities directors to help people find their purpose. So I feel like the increasing importance of that role, along with the technology enabling it, is really making changes.
Well, I'll tell you two things. I'll say the second thing first before I forget. But there's a guy on TikTok who's in his 80s. I can't remember his name right now. Who has gone viral with his cooking videos. And little sweet, cute old man, a little hat. I forget. I don't know. You Google it, you'll find him. The guy's making waves, and he has tens of thousands of people that are watching his videos. Now, even he does. Most people at that age, finances is not something that concerns them very much. Uh, they'll be on Medicaid. They may have Social Security. Obviously, there are people who are challenged still. But the point is, he's not looking to start a business, but he's making a real impact, and he's loving every moment of it. And TikTok and 82-year-olds are like don't belong in the same sentence. But we have a lot of assumptions about seniors that are flawed. We have a lot of us. How many people who we would call them seniors, we would call them people who have no connection to technology, they taught themselves Zoom. They taught themselves even just emailing. They taught them like basic technology skills, even just getting used to the computer. By the way, I love when people say the computer. Those are the same people who on Clubhouse you can't see, but they do their phone like this. They're with one finger. Anyway. So the point is, people are much more capable if we give them the opportunity. They may have a different style of learning. But guess what? They're probably much smarter than we are. They've done a lot of things. They've accomplished. They've been through events that we have not experienced. Whatever we think we're being smart and whatever, they've done this for decades before we were born. So they might not have a thing or two over us. That's really the second point. The other point is, I love your observation that there are so many different titles for this role. I think the reason for that, and I'm not sure if this is if you're connecting the dots or not, but I think the reason for that is because it's a real identity crisis.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah. Right. We're trying to figure out, is this person, is it recreation? Is it activities? Is it life enhancement? Is it whatever all the different names are? Is it entertainers? I know I spoke to somebody recently. Yeah, she used to do painting. It's a long story. She may come on the podcast one day. But she resented the term entertainers. A lot of activities directors refer to anyone they bring in as a vendor, entertainer, because basically there's like this assumption we have to make sure there's only a certain amount of the time that they're in therapy, getting their meds, being changed, eating, going to bed, and watching all these movies. There's time in between, and we need to fill that time in a responsible way. So it's like entertaining. Thank God I have a bunch of little kids. Then when there's no school, you got to entertain them somehow. And then sometimes we tell them, sorry, we don't entertain you. Just live, figure something out. Right. So the point is that if you look at time as a problem, if we're not actively managing their health crisis, then we have a problem. What do we do with them? Oh, we have to entertain them. Get the local tone deaf, never made it musician in house to entertain them for a little bit. And the only reason why they don't throw tomatoes is because they can't hear. Or whatever, whatever it is. Get someone else. Now, I don't think it's the wrong way. There are many entertainers that are really entertaining, and they do a phenomenal job with the residents. And they're also underpaid, underappreciated. But the term is what I'm coming to, and the term can be it has a negative connotation to it. It's like there's a problem of having time as opposed to saying we have an opportunity. There are people who are closer to the end of life, or we perceive them to be closer to the end of life than others. And they've already gone through, experienced the challenges, the pleasures. They have a very interesting life already. So these people, trying this again for Clubhouse. All right. Anyway, so they've gone through quite a bit already. Now they have an opportunity to shine. This person is taking his experience and he's sharing it online. And all of a sudden, there's a whole community that was around this little quiet person who, for all you know, never spoke up in a crowd of two. And now all of a sudden, there's thousands of people following this guy. And I'm not saying that nursing home residents should be online superstars. They can be, but that opportunity should be open to them. They're full-fledged people, even if they're somewhat challenged. If put it this way, if you really want to test society, and I know I'm talking too much here, but if you really want a good example of the way we look at these people as seniors from a society level, take the same physical challenges that they have. So maybe someone is in a brief, maybe someone's in a wheelchair, maybe somebody is on multiple meds, maybe they even have a trach, maybe someone's a stroke victim. And then instead of being 82 years old, make that person 8 years old or 2 years old. How would we respect them at that point? What do the activities department look like in children's hospital as opposed, or children's long-term care hospital as opposed to a senior living facility? And then you'll see that the value that our society puts on what the years that are left for our seniors to live. I'm sorry if I'm getting a little too heavy here, but I think this is the truth, and I'm a little bit sick and tired of beating around the bush. So I mean, that's really what it is. And really, conversations like this that you're doing, and you're reaching out to people in this industry and bringing your experience that you have to this space and understanding. Let's take these types of, call them pleasures, call them indulgences that busy adults don't always have time sufficiently to deal with. They have time, let them enjoy their time. Bring a spot to the facility. Don't let it just be, washing their hair, so that when the Department of Public Health comes in, they won't say we abused our residents, because we make sure their hair is washed once in a while, which they pay for, by the way. And I'm whatever from their 72, 80 or whatever they get from what's left over. But it shouldn't be that way. It should. Let's introduce real life experience. We'll call them life experience specialists. Add that to the list of names. All right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just like the general idea, of what you're saying. Glowing older. Where does this come from that you feel so strongly about this, and that you're pushing this industry in this direction? I'm just curious. Is there a personal event, like what's motivating you?
Well, I think it comes back to my grandparents, that they lived in this CCRC that was quite a luxury, expensive, top of the line, cutting edge, leading edge. Mm-hmm. And they had a community garden, but none of that food ever made it into the restaurant. And they were Quakers, so they were very much into alternative medicine and taking care of themselves. My grandma swam every day until the week she died. My grandfather played tennis until he was 91. But none of those things made it into it was still an institution at the end of the day. And so I think spending so much time there and watching my grandparents' last years and thinking, this is as good as it gets. There's got to be something better. I interviewed Crystal Culler, who has the virtual brain health center. And when she was working in one facility, she just wanted to get water to the residents instead of all this junk that they were feeding them, the processed cans of whatever it was. She's like, can we just get some fruit infused water? And it was like a battle, like a month-long battle to get fresh water with fruit in it. And so I think that it, because it's an institution, unfortunately, it gets institutionalized like a prison or something else where nothing is customized. Everything is shoved down people's throats. And I just see a change coming. I don't quite definitely the boomers will not tolerate this. They're a good 10, 11 years from entering facilities statistically, but they are making a lot of decisions, the adult children, for their parents that are coming to these facilities. And especially the pandemic and nursing homes getting such bad press. I feel like it's time for a shakeup. And I can tell in your voice that your frustrations, you're really trying to shake up an industry that doesn't want to be shaken up. And a lot of that is nonprofit, which makes it, I think, even more difficult sometimes for innovation. They just don't want to make any changes.
Yeah, I don't know if I completely agree that the industry doesn't want to be shooken up. I think there are some systemic challenges that they have to confront. I think that operators who go into this business, take somebody who's investing millions and millions of dollars into even a single building. They're coming into this, they can take the same money and invest in a startup. They take the same money and invest in another functioning, but even if they don't want to take the risks of a startup, but any other functioning business, whatever profit margin, and you take out what the business is and just look at it on a spreadsheet and dollars for cents, they don't have to go into this industry. I think, and from an operator standpoint, there are many, many, many good, well-intentioned operators who are doing the best that they can in the situation as it is. I think that in order for real change to happen, it has to happen on the highest possible level. And it has to be that the feelings that we're sharing right now and the perspectives that we're sharing right now, I think they have to be verbalized, and the concrete action has to happen. And like you said, like, this is as good as it gets. So yeah, people will make a counter argument and they'll say, there's a good reason why there's an institutionalized setting. The only way to manage some of these really challenging behaviors, let's say you have a resident with advanced dementia and they're wandering out. So you need to have certain things in place. They may need to be in a locked unit. Now, actually, what I heard, we had on the podcast, Susan Dwyer of the Greenhouse Effect.
Susan Ryan?
Susan Ryan, thank you. Did you have her too?
No, but I like to. I think she's amazing.
She is, and I absolutely love the concept. And I think she's the one who mentioned. Thank you for correcting me with the name. I think she's the one who mentioned that when they have a dementia unit, instead of locking the residents in their unit, they lock the rest of the facility. I think they just lock them from leaving the facility. But the point is, they reverse how it works. So basically, they're free to roam everywhere in the facility, but they're still safe and they can't leave the facility. Something like that. I forget exactly how it works technically, but the point is, I've been to facilities where here's our locked unit. You need a code to get in, you need a code to get out. The residents are pretty much in this hallway all day, every day. They'll only leave here if they must go out to the hospital, if they must go to the therapy gym, which is not located on their unit. Some of them will have their own therapy gyms, and I get it, it's for their safety. But guess what? They don't have sufficient staffing to say that they should be left more freely, and we'll still look out for them. And I've personally chased a resident from the nursing home that I was the administrator of out the door, almost actually onto the freeway, and was physically, my director of nurses followed me eventually on the phone with the cops, blocking off traffic on the highway from someone who was trying to walk into traffic. I think not. I'm still not sure the end of the story. I think it was really more not fully aware of the consequences of what was going on. I don't think it was attempted suicide, and the whole time swinging his cane at me and tell me how what I'm doing is illegal, which frankly it might have been illegal, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let someone just throw himself into traffic, and yeah, we were able to save him. The point is that it's a real challenge, and it's not just simple like, oh, why doesn't everyone just care and solve the problem? Finances is a huge part of the problem. There's the institutionalized mindset, which does need to be changed. The greenhouse effect, the greenhouse model, where they have pods as opposed to long hallways, and they have consistent staffing. It's the same aide who bathes the resident, who feeds the resident, who cooks for the resident, who cleans. It's like you would have in a real home, right? If you live in a house, usually whoever's, unless you have hired help, but usually whoever, the people who live in the house are the ones who do multiple jobs. I come home, my wife does, manages many more departments than I do, and she doesn't have people in her department. The people in her department get in her way. And those are my kids. So the point is, the point is here that it's gonna take more than just this conversation to make actual change, but I think we're going in the right direction. Just I'm just looking at the time here, and I see the time is moving on here. We do have to wrap up, but before we do that, any final thoughts you want to share about this topic, that our listeners really should learn more about before we wrap up today?
Well, I think there's going to be big change coming. I think that concepts like the greenhouse have shown that not only are they better for pandemic prevention, that the greenhouse has been really immune from a lot of deaths because of the way they're set up. So I think there will be a big change. I think that we'll see some big players from traditional senior living concepts not make it. I think that we're going to see a little bit of a shakeout coming because numbers have been so down across the board. And there'll be sort of a phoenix rising from the ashes of new concepts. And they'll be multi-generational, and they won't be based on ageism and ableism. And one of the biggest problems is resident to resident
altercations.
Yeah, and divisiveness. Like by the time you have a disability, you're no longer able to be in the same group you were before. So I think that it's an exciting time. I think it's going to be slower change than maybe some of us want, but podcasts like yours that are really talking about real issues and not just glossing over and making incremental change. I think you're trying to start a revolution. So thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. I don't know if that was the original intention, but as we're just speaking to more and more people in the industry, it's apparent that this is the direction we need to go in. If people want to learn more about you, about your podcast, where's the best place to send them?
Glowingolder.com.
Okay, so head on over to glowingolder.com, which is really, I think the name itself, it speaks for itself. It's pretty much everything we've been speaking about here today. And go check out Nancy's podcast, subscribe, check out all the episodes. It sounds like there's been some really fantastic episodes. This episode will be live on the Nursing Home Podcast in the next little while, as soon as we get to it. And Nancy, thank you so much for coming on the Nursing Home Podcast. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Yes, and for those who are listening, we were streaming this live on Clubhouse. We're still streaming. Oh, look at that. I wasn't talking on Clubhouse. But we were streaming this live on Clubhouse most of the time. It was a little bit new, which is why we had some technical glitches. But hopefully in the future we'll be able to do this in a smoother way. But thank you, Nancy, for bearing with us.